Okay, so let's talk about cluttering versus stuttering. Here's some data on prevalence. It is 1.1 to 1.2% of school-aged children. There are likely higher rates for students with cognitive impairments. Cluttering is common in persons with Down syndrome. Some experts believe that the occurrence of cluttering tends to be underestimated because many people who clutter do not seek speech therapy or consider cluttering to be something they consider it a minor disorder. More recent prevalence studies indicate that cluttering is more prevalent than stuttering, and that's from Van Zalen, Cook, Ellings, and Howell, 2011, Schnell, Abnick, and Van Zalen, 2013, Van Zalen, Deckers, Driven, Kaiser, Van Kamede, and Terhove, 2012. Another study by Winkleman in 1990 indicated that there was high comorbidity of cluttering with learning disabilities in high school students. And then an older study, so not really sure if there's anything more current, but according to Luschinger and Arnold, 1970, cluttering is 4 times more prevalent in males than females, which makes sense because we see that in lots of types of disorders. So here are some of the characteristics of stuttering versus cluttering. And we're going to go through that. So in stuttering, we see a high frequency of stuttered-like disfluencies, such as part word repetition, sound prolongations, and blocks. And in cluttering, we see a high frequency of non-stuttered types of disfluencies, revisions, interjections, phrase, and multisyllabic word repetitions. And as I've said earlier, when we're talking about stuttering, typically the person who stutters knows just exactly what they want to say, but they have difficulty with the motor movements and, get blocked at some point in the vocal tract. Whereas with cluttering, the speaker does not have a pre-planned message and they encounter problems as they try to deliver that message. People who stutter are typically very highly aware, whereas we see with cluttering, there's little to no awareness. And people who clutter generally judge their speech positively, and are often surprised when they hear their own speech recorded. With stuttering, many have anticipatory anxiety about speaking. For example, they might be concerned about words that start with a certain sound or that present an increased likelihood of stuttering. And with cluttering, often there is no anticipatory concern. It doesn't mean that there's none and that it's not possible. It's just less common. And then also with stuttering tends to increase when a person is stressed. And what's really interesting to me is that cluttering tends to increase when a person is relaxed. Next, we're going to see a video of some people who clutter talking about stuttering versus cluttering.
Can you tell us a little bit about the relationship between cluttering and stuttering?
Sure. This is going to be a rather long answer, maybe. But well, actually, stuttering. Most people think of stuttering, of course, or know stuttering as people who stutter. When they are talking, they tend to have these tense blockages, for example. So apple or something, and with cluttering, it's actually the other way around, because cluttering, people clutter, they actually don't have these kind of tense blockages or prolongations, for example, in their speech, but they actually talk very very fast, first of all, like me as well, so actually what they are doing is, because they are talking too fast, they're actually stumbling over their words, so therefore it becomes a whole mumble jumble of things, and they also have difficulty, in organizing their own thoughts to, to speak fluently. So basically in cluttering, there is a language problem. I mean, a language planning problem. So basically, the coordination from your brain to your mouth. Like what am I going to say now, and how does that express in my speech? In this process, something goes wrong, but that's different from stuttering because, well, again, stuttering. People who stutter actually know very well mostly what they want to say, but they just can express their words or sounds. And people who clutter, they actually don't know exactly what they're going to say, so they have problems later on in their speech. So that is a fundamental difference between cluttering and stuttering.
So that was a great example. You could hear a lot of the normal types of disfluencies almost to an excessive degree in his description. And he also reiterated a lot of those differences between stuttering and cluttering that we already talked about. So now we have another little video of a person talking about cluttering versus stuttering.
Most people who stutter have an idea most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, exactly what they want to say. The problem for them is getting stuck on just for some reason being unable to complete that movement. With cluttering, on the other hand, it appears that many of them, most of them, if you will, just simply start talking. And then they just encounter problems. Often they're unaware of them until somebody brings it up over and over again. And they often just can't put their finger on what the problem really is. It's just like, that's how I talk. And if I have lots of repetitions, you have repetitions, you have why are mine any different? Well, it's because they are excessive and people can't understand. I think that's when the listener begins to tune in. This is something different. This is, it's not stuttering because I don't hear them struggling. I just hear them repeating or talking or collapsing words and so on. Now, with stuttering, on the other hand, I think the listener immediately picks up on struggle.
And I think this is where cluttering is different from stuttering, because you don't have to stutter very often, but those kind of senses of physiological, difficulty in moving forward with speech, I think are quite different to the types of problems that people who clutter have, which is, in some senses, it's the opposite for me. It's almost like it's kind of blur. It's like it's kind of run-on stuff, which is just kind of out before you know it.
Generally, like with a clutter or a pure clutter, you can say, okay, read these 20 words with R, ready, rough, and then someone with cluttering will be able to do that probably really fast, and they might like repeat words, but they won't have any anxiousness about the actual like R sound. But with stuttering, then the person with stuttering is going to have like a lot of anxiousness and be like, oh, hey, actually, before we get to the before we get to the R, I need to take a break, and then the person with stuttering will like run down the street and not finish the alphabet.
All right. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is how does articulatory rate impact cluttering assessment and diagnosis? And I'm going to show you a graphic here. So this shows the mean articulatory rate, or the speed with which we produce sounds, as a rate in syllables per second. And you'll see, let me move that again, that it steadily increases and peaks in adolescence to young adulthood. So the rate is slower for young children and building and then peaking beginning at age 11.3 through age 21 and then begins to reduce again. So what does this mean, and what does this have to do with assessment and identification? I show you this to be aware and that many children are not identified as a person who clutters until adolescence. This is because of the changes in speech rates. Cluttering manifests when language development is at an advanced stage, and cluttering is difficult to identify in children below age 10 for these reasons that is this a language issue? Is this student stumbling over because they don't have the underlying grammatical and vocabulary knowledge because their language system is still developing? And remember that their speech rates are slower. And then as we develop, and all of a sudden now the natural speech rate is faster and we have more of that difficulty adjusting the rate of speech to the moment and to the linguistic and demands of the speaking task. It doesn't mean that you can't be under age 10 and be a clutterer and you can identify it. It's just harder. And we see an increase in the symptomology and the characteristics in the adolescent years because of those increased speech rates. So some key features in children under 10. We're still going to talk about that fast speech or articulatory rate, telescoping when using multi-syllables, and or other words, collapsing the words, omitting small words such as articles or prepositions when reading aloud, when writing, or during auditory memory tests. So that's interesting to me that the omission of small words occurs not just in speaking tasks, but also in writing and in repetition tests. Semantic or syntactic errors during fast writing or speech, and yet those disappear in slower writing or speech tasks. So you're differentiating is the skill present when we have the slower rate and attention, and then we see the errors with the increased speed. Getting stuck while reading or relying on guessing while reading. And of course, many children do this that have no speech difficulty. So it's just a characteristic that in combination with many others may lead you to suspect or to diagnose cluttering. Many errors occurring during reading at a fast rate, but not at a slow rate. So again, you get that difference. And grapheme substitutions between B and D, which again is quite common in children that have no speech difficulties. So in the next piece, we're going to now talk about syntactic versus phonological cluttering. These are two subtypes of cluttering. It doesn't mean that a person has just one pure possibility of being one or the other. You can have characteristics of both. Let's see, where's the best place to get rid of that little blob? There we go. So we're just going to have to move that little blob around. So in syntactic cluttering, the problems are in grammatical encoding and word retrieval at a fast rate of speech. So it's that combination of the fast rate of speech and the grammatical encoding. The symptoms occur more frequently when it's a linguistically complex situation, and it manifests as primarily normal disfluencies. Conversely, with the phonological cluttering, the problems are in phonological encoding. The symptoms occur, again, more frequently in linguistically complex situations. And this is characterized more by those word structure errors, such as coalescence, telescoping, syllable sequencing errors, at a fast rate of speech, especially with multisyllabic words. In your diagnostic tasking, if you have a student that has some awareness, a good question to ask to help you differentiate between the syntactic and the phonological cluttering is that you can ask what interferes more with your communication. Is it planning and formulating your thoughts or fast and unclear speech? And it's going to indicate which is the dominant feature. The next section, we're going to talk about the state board rules and looking at cluttering and fluency disorders.